Breaking news to bring you here on GB News. In the last few minutes, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has resigned. He was under increasing pressure after a report criticised his handlings of the allegations against John Smyth, who sexually abused hundreds of children in the 1970s and 1980s. Well, we can head straight over to Lambeth Palace now and speak to GB News correspondent Olivia Utley, who's been following this story for us all day. Olivia.
Yes, it feels as though Justin Welby was bowing to the inevitable. Last week he said that he was going to stay in the post. He said that he had considered resigning but had decided against it. That position became untenable by this morning. The Bishop of Newcastle, along with three very senior members of the clergy, members of the Synod, along with a whole plethora of Smyth's victims, said that Justin Welby had to go. At the same time, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, refused to back the Archbishop of Canterbury. He said that these were very, very troubling allegations, and he did not want to brush aside just how serious these allegations were. It was very clear that Parliament and the Synod had turned against the Archbishop of Canterbury. He has now said that he is going to step down, and in his resignation statement, he says that he hopes this resignation will show just how seriously the Church of England takes these abuses. We don't yet have a timeline on when we can expect him to stand down. He says that that will be a matter for the Anglican Church, and he wants to carry on upholding his constitutional duties. But he has said he will hand over his responsibilities for safeguarding for somebody else for the rest of his time in office. The allegations levelled at Justin Welby was that he did not take seriously enough the abuse allegations from John Smyth. John Smyth was a lay preacher who ran Christian camps in Zimbabwe in the 1970s and 80s. He was found to have abused 130 or so children. But when Justin Welby was informed of this abuse in 2013, Welby was told incorrectly that the matter had been reported to the police, and Welby didn't look into it any further. He let the matter be brushed under the carpet. That has led to the victims of Smyth never receiving justice. Smyth died in 2018 while Hampshire police were still investigating him. So that is why Justin Welby felt the need to step down today. It really does throw the Church of England into a very difficult position.
Has been such a staple of British cultural life since he assumed the role back in 2013. But Olivia, I've got to say, I've got his resignation statement in front of me here. Let's just read it through. The statement from the Archbishop of Canterbury being released in the last few minutes. He says as follows. Having sought the gracious permission of His Majesty the King, I have decided to resign as Archbishop of Canterbury. The Macon Review has exposed the long-maintained conspiracy of silence about the heinous abuses of John Smyth. When I was informed in 2013 and told that police had been notified, I believed wrongly that an appropriate resolution would follow. It is very clear that I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2024. It's my duty to honour my constitutional and church responsibilities, so exact timings will be decided once a review of necessary obligations has been completed, including those in England and in the Anglican Communion. I hope this decision makes clear how seriously the Church of England understands the need for change and our profound commitment to creating a safer church. As I step down, I do so in sorrow with all victims and survivors of abuse. The last few days have renewed my long-felt and profound sense of shame at the historic safeguarding failures of the Church of England. For nearly 12 years, I have struggled to introduce improvements. It is for others to judge what has been done. In the meantime, I will follow through on my commitment to meet victims. I will delegate all my other current responsibilities for safeguarding until the necessary risk assessment process is complete. I ask everyone to keep my wife Caroline and my children in their prayers. They have been my most important support throughout my ministry, and I am eternally grateful for their sacrifice. Caroline led the Spouses programme during the Lambeth conference and has travelled tirelessly in areas of conflict, supporting the most vulnerable, the women, and those who care for them locally. I believe that stepping aside is in the best interests of the Church of England, which I dearly love, and which I have been honoured to serve. I pray this decision points us back towards the love that Jesus Christ has for every one of us. For above all else, my deepest commitment is to the person of Jesus Christ, my Saviour and my Lord, the bearer of the sins and the burdens of the world, and the hope of every person. Well, that was the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, in his resignation statement. Olivia Utley, your reaction?
Well, I think what makes things difficult for Justin Welby is he talks there about his reflections over the last few days. But the truth is, he was pushed. He didn't really jump. It was just 5 days ago that he said that he wasn't planning on resigning. He said that he had considered resigning and had decided against it. He only stepped down today when it became clear that his position was untenable, because he just did not have the support of the Church of England clergy nor of Parliament. So I think that makes that slightly undermines the statement that he has made. I think the other issue that is worth dwelling on for a minute is the fact that Justin Welby has sort of built a rod for his own back, and possibly built a rod for his successors' back too, in that every time there's been a sort of major political issue, something like, for example, the talk about reparations for slavery back in the 17 or 1800s, Justin Welby has weighed in on these issues. He has sort of presented the Church of England as a political body, and so when he himself is found to have fallen short of standards, I think it makes it more difficult for him than perhaps somebody else in his position. I think that's a really awkward position for an Archbishop of Canterbury to be in. It'll be fascinating to see how this replacement process takes place and who replaces Archbishop Justin Welby, because as far as I'm aware, there hasn't really been a case like this before, with an Archbishop having to resign under such a cloud and really so abruptly.
Absolutely. It does seem that this is uncharted waters for Lambeth Palace. They must have been having crisis meetings all day. Olivia, you were saying earlier that meetings this morning were indeed cancelled.
Yeah, meetings were cancelled this morning, and it was said that at a meeting that was planned for this afternoon, I don't know whether it went ahead in the end or if Welby jumped the gun by resigning before it was to take place, there was to be a meeting at Church House where it would be made clear to the people of Lambeth Palace behind me that Parliament was no longer standing behind Justin Welby. So I think from this morning it was clear that he had no choice but to step away. But as I say, I think what makes this very, very awkward, both for Welby and for the Church of England, is that just last week Welby was happily telling journalists that although he had had a period of reflection, he had chosen not to resign. He didn't jump, he was pushed, and he was pushed by Parliament, by those members of the Synod, by various victims of John Smyth, and this morning by the Archbishop of Newcastle as well. So a really, really tricky position that Welby found himself in, and that he actually leaves the Church of England in now.
It's interesting to note, you mentioned Parliament. Of course, the Member of Parliament, Nick Timothy, has been scathing in his calls for Welby to stand down, saying that there is this almost blind spot. He's been unembarrassed about involving himself in contentious political issues, whether or not it's the asylum policies of the previous government, which he called, which he said could not stand the judgment of God, or whether it's involving himself in Black Lives Matter protests, setting up the Archbishop's Commission on Racial Justice. He's been very moralistic, perhaps understandably, for an Archbishop on so many areas. But then this area of child abuse connected with the Church of England, where not enough was done, where he knew that it was going on and seemingly didn't pursue it because he felt it was simply for the police to do after 2013. Fairly extraordinary that on the one hand he was crusading on so many different areas, whether it's the Rwanda asylum scheme or Black Lives Matter controversy or the Archbishop's Commission on Racial Justice, but so blind to the real abuse within people connected to the church.
Well, exactly, and I think that's what makes his position so difficult and why he had to step down today. As you say, Tom, perhaps it is right for an Archbishop of Canterbury to take a stand on these very political issues. Justin Welby supporters have always said that, there is no point in the modern Church of England unless it does take a stand on these intrinsically moral issues. But his detractors would argue that Justin Welby has made the position of Archbishop of Canterbury more overtly political than any of his predecessors. You mentioned there, Tom, the fact that he weighed in on the Rwanda policy of the previous government. He wasn't scared of making himself an enemy of the Conservatives, or perhaps just Conservatives generally, people, small c Conservatives. Justin Welby did not count himself as one of them and did not mind if he made himself an enemy of them. And I think in a way that has been part of his undoing. Nick Timothy MP, Conservative MP, former advisor to Theresa May, actually, and a big supporter of the Rwanda plan, was one of the people who had tabled an amendment today saying that Justin Welby's position was untenable. I'm sure there are plenty on the Conservative benches who will be quite pleased to see the back of the Archbishop. And I think the fact that he made himself such a political figure did make his position in Lambeth Palace really awkward when it became clear that he did have this enormous blind spot when it came to sexual abuse within the Church of England.